everybody and welcome to a slightly different video from usual. So if you've been following my channel for a while or watched any of my other videos, you know I almost exclusively do book related content. This is a booktube. But I have mentioned in previous videos that I wanted to do just some other stuff, whether that be TV reviews or reviews of cartoons and things that I watch. You know, I'm one of those people that really likes watching animated shows, regardless of really what the age demographic is. And particularly for my degree, I'm an animation student. I personally as well just try to keep up with like different bits and pieces just so I can be aware of the context within what I'm learning in my degree. So yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about a show called Miraculous Ladybug, and well, the full name is Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir, but colloquially it's just but most people just call it Miraculous Ladybug. Which is a French animated cartoon that began in 2016 and is currently still airing on its 4th season and will have up to at least 7 seasons. It's been renewed up that far. And yeah, it's slightly younger than a lot more cartoons people watch. You know, when you sort of think of like kids cartoons, you maybe think of something like Avatar: The Last Airbender or She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. And whilst those are definitely aimed at kids, you know, there is plenty in there for older fans like myself to enjoy. You know, some of the themes that they do are quite dark or quite heavy, but then told in a way that is understandable to kids. So they're more like family sort of age demographic than for kids, almost in the same way that Disney movies are. But Miraculous Ladybug, I think, is one that is definitely perhaps aged down even more than that. But perhaps not down quite as far as, you know, something like fucking Peppa Pig or anything. No, it's like still on that same vein, but is still perhaps, you know, for just a mildly younger audience. And the sort of history of the show and stuff it's been quite messy up, it would be perhaps how I describe it. Originally it was supposed to be a comic, the original idea by Thomas Ostruck, the director. It was originally supposed to be a comic aimed at teenagers, and it was supposed to be quite dark theming and things, you know, for teenagers and sort of older audiences. But then when it got picked up by Jeremy Zag and his production, it got decided to make it into a cartoon and to age it down for a younger audience. But yeah, so what I'm going to be talking about today really is the recent episode called Wishmaker. Now, Series 4 is airing, and this is like easily the best season of Miraculous to date. It's brought in a lot more continuity that wasn't really seen in previous seasons and is doing a lot more with the character development and the development of the plot. So yeah, I kind of just want to talk about it because I think that it just proves, it's almost like proof of concept of what we could have had if they'd been given the time earlier to really decide what they wanted the show to be and not been pushed this direction or another. Because if you've seen Miraculous, you'll know that it's kind of taken a while to get to where it is pacing wise and with the balance between its repetitive sort of episodic formula with overarching plot and character development. So I'm going to get into that. The way I'm going to structure this video though is I'll give you a brief history, well not history, but like brief explanation of Miraculous Ladybug, what the show is about, series 1, 2 and 3 and the specials, and what my thoughts are on them. And then I will get into series 4. I'll try and keep that first bit quite short. I don't want this video to be too long, because obviously I know it's a sort of deviation from my usual booktube content. I kind of want to just test the waters a bit. So yeah, so as I said, I'll do a quick thing of what Miraculous is in case there's people watching this that don't know but are interested to hear what I have to say about it. We'll go through series 1 to 3, the specials, and then I'll get on to series 4 and then on to Wishmaker specifically and why I think it's basically the best episode of Miraculous to date. So, general information, like I said, Miraculous Ladybug is a French cartoon and it's set in Paris following 2 superheroes called Ladybug and Cat Noir who spend their days battling the mysterious villain called Hawkmoth, who uses his sort of powers to take people's negative emotions and cause them to be completely ruled by them and turn them into super villains with questionable costumes. And outside their superhero lives, Ladybug is a teenage girl called Marinette, and Cat Noir is a teenage boy called Adrien, and they go to school together, but they don't know each other's superhero identities. This is a huge thing in the story, is that, you know, Ladybug doesn't know that Cat Noir is Adrien, Cat Noir and Adrien doesn't know that Ladybug is Marinette. You know, that's a huge big secret. So but they go to school together and are kind of friends, and it's basically just a story about them just like dealing with their daily lives whilst also then dealing with Hawkmoth and the supervillains that they have to fight every day. It's a really simple premise. The creator describes it as a love story on the backdrop of a superhero story. And when I say love story, because Marinette and Adrian are in love with each other, but they don't know that they are, and thus introduces the biggest hook of the show and why so many people love it, I think, despite the fact that it's really simple and aimed at kids, is like, a lot of people, especially my age, are really invested in the love story because you have this thing called the love square, which is that, Marinette has fallen in love with Adrian, her classmate, but Adrian, and also subsequently Cat Noir, because, they're the same person, he's in love with Ladybug. And kind of because of the feelings they have for each other's specific identity, Ladybug then therefore has no romantic feelings towards Cat Noir, and Adrian then has no romantic feelings towards his friend Marinette. It's dramatic irony, the cartoon. It's a fucking fantastic premise, because obviously, they're in love with each other but they don't know it. It's such a good hook. You spend the entire time just wanting to see if they're going to reveal each other's identities, how the relationship will work going forward, sort of thing. It's very, very, very clever concept. And the show basically forms a sort of, at least for the first season, it's a very repetitive formulaic episodic format. So each episode basically follows the same structure. You're introduced to, whatever the thing is that's happening in that episode. Marinette and Adrian maybe have a thing that they have to deal with at school, and then you cut to whoever is going to be the villain of the week and whatever situation's happening to them to piss them off. In comes Hawkmoth to turn their negative emotions into superpowers. They become a supervillain. Marinette and Adrian have to go and transform into Ladybug and Cat Noir, sort of Sailor Moon style. They fight the villain. Everything's resolved, and then they go back, and then sort of at the end of it they'll have sorted out the problem they were having at the beginning of the episode in their civilian lives, yada yada yada. And you get that every single episode, and, which works, if they're not, a lot of people get really pissed off with this show for not having, like, much plot and just going through that episodic formula, but, like, if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. People really can't get mad about that. And then whatever happens in that episode really has, like, no, bearing on any other episodes. It just kind of, oh yeah, that happened in that episode, and then we'll move on to the next episode and it won't get mentioned again. It really is just self-contained stories. And yeah, so that was the first season specifically. Everything really was well contained. It had really good direction. It wasn't trying to be anything more than that. Yes, it could have had an overarching plot, but decided not to, and I think that decision was, they stuck to that decision for the first series. And audience reception was great, it got huge hype. I watched, from not just young kids, but also a lot older audiences. Myself, I was about 16, 17 at the time. And there's plenty of even older, both men and women, who quite like this show, because it's cute, it's fun. It doesn't try to be anything too difficult, it's just a fun little thing. It has some fun visuals, it's 3D animation, and the first series was animated by SAMG, which is a really, really good animation studio. Pretty decent animation considering the budget they were on. It was just a fun little show. However, then in the last 3 episodes, in the finale, and then they also tacked on sort of 2 origin episodes, because the first episode just throws you into it, and it's a really, really good episode for that kind of idea. You get introduced to the idea and things really well. But you never actually see how Ladybug and Cat Noir got, because the reason that they're superheroes is they have these things called Miraculouses. Ladybug has earrings and Cat Noir has a ring. And this allows them to transform into superheroes. So yeah, Origins was just like a really interesting direction for them to go with. You had a 2-parter that was continuity. It saw some really good development. Marinette goes from not knowing Adrian and actually not liking him to, falling in love with him and stuff, and that sort of kickstart the sort of love story. It was actually interesting to see them develop their characters, develop their friendships and relationships just over 2 episodes. And the finale as well brought in a couple of new characters and things, and also brought in some world building, some history. Just some really interesting ideas that then actually had sort of like impact on later seasons. And then sort of, the creators then promised sort of with these episodes and in Comic-Con panels and stuff that there would be more plot in future seasons. But, we'll kind of get to that, because then, that really brought in the hype for series 2, series 3, people got really excited, especially sort of like teenagers and slightly older audiences who, whilst they enjoyed the episodic format, were kind of wanting a bit more from the show. We kind of got promised that we would get that, and series 2 and 3, basically don't deliver. They have a few sort of plot heavy episodes here and there, but they'll develop a character in one episode, and the next episode they'll immediately back to who they were before the development they happened. You know, things only have like continuity from like plot episode to plot episode, and then like sort of the 5 regular episodes in between will just be like back to the normal episodic sort of filler sort of feeling. And yeah, it just kind of didn't really work as well as having a whole series of just like repetitive episodes. Actually bringing in plot almost, you know, they just didn't quite get their pacing right on wanting to keep their episodic repetitive format but have plot happening. They just took them a while, I think, to really get their stride and their pacing with that. So, and a lot of things, I think the interesting things that happen in series 2 with the introduction of new superheroes and some history and world building, as well as some power-ups and stuff. You know, we're all spoiled really before the series aired, which was really irritating, and I think just ruined the enjoyment for a lot of people. Series 3 then as well kind of followed the same sort of pattern of having some really good plot episodes, having some really not bad plot episodes, having some just mediocre filler episodes. Really just couldn't quite, it's like it just couldn't quite tell what it wanted to do and what it wanted to be. It had lost its direction from series 1 with its decision to bring in plot, but I don't think they were given enough time to really tighten it and actually work out how they wanted to pace the whole series. My thoughts just on the show so far then. So series 1, I thought, as I said, you know, yes, it was basically an entire series of filler, but you know, it was fun, it was just something to watch. It knew what it wanted to be and it stuck to it. It had really good direction, and you know, the Origins episodes were really good fun sort of like addition for like slightly, you know, addition to the series. But then you get to series 2, series 3, and I think series 2, not much really happened. You get introduced to 2 characters who are the secondary love interests, Marinette and Adrian, and you get a little bit of development between them, but you know, you get some Love Square development in Glaciator, you know, you get some Kwame lore, but all in all, I just really feel like that season had kind of lost its direction a little bit. Series 3 saw a bit of a return to form. You know, they had a bit more like of an idea of when they wanted to do a sort of plot heavy episode versus a filler kind of episode. They were kind of getting there, but still some decisions were made with like some of the characters and stuff, which was a bit interesting. I really liked episodes like Ikari Goes In and Animaestro. Reflectol, I thought it was really interesting to see them sort of switch powers, and Oblivio as well, absolute favourite of mine. I liked what they were trying to do with Cat Blanc, but all in all, I actually didn't really like that episode too much. It just sort of felt a bit useless, and don't even get me fucking started on the time travel in this show. I'm so pissed off. I don't like time travel. It just causes too many problems in my opinion that don't get addressed. Like, you know, I liked what they were going for with Cat Blanc with having a sort of hypothetical future episode, but just the execution just wasn't really for me. And yeah, I just feel like a lot of the build up to the sort of new heroes that you saw in that episode again was just too short and not quite as well worked into the episode that they could have been. And I didn't like the finale. I didn't like that they basically spent 2 seasons developing this one character to then just completely reverse it, and she goes back to how she was in the first series. So that was fucking annoying. Yeah. So that kind of leads us up to series 3 and series 4. The specials. I like Shanghai. I really like Shanghai. I felt that it, you know, it had a much more simple storyline, I think, at times, and whilst it wasn't perfect, I still think it was better than New York, and it was really sort of like interesting to sort of see Marinette in Shanghai and stuff, and it was just quite funny just with like, you know, them trying to think of excuses as to why they were both in Shanghai and things. Like, I thought it was a pretty good episode, and it had the right amount of exposition as well, because they've only got an hour, but then they've got this whole other new character and lore and stuff to bring in. Yeah, I think it did a better job than New York, because New York had far too much going on, and whilst it did seem to rely on continuity from series 3, what happens in New York then hasn't been mentioned in series 4. So you're kind of like, you know, is it canon in the continuity, or are we treating them as separate things? Or, and whilst I liked a lot of the stuff that was going on, you know, Cat Noir giving up his Miraculous, and, you know, all the stuff going on with that, I just thought, you know, Marinette trying to move on from her feelings for Adrian, you know, that was an interesting thing to go with, but again, by the end, everything's sort of reversed to normal. Nothing's changed, nothing's had any sort of impact at all, and as I said, it's not being mentioned in series 4, so yeah, and there was far too many extra American superheroes that was just not explained and things, like that was a whole thing. But anywho, series 4, so far, I love it. You know, I thought the opening 2 episodes were a fantastic experiment with format, so, you know, having one episode that focuses solely on Marinette and then other episodes that focuses solely on Adrian, but in the same time period, and just seeing kind of what they both had to deal with at the same time, you know, and almost like mirror kind of things, you know, it's about the transition ships, RIP to the transition ships, RIP to Luca and Kagami. But yeah, I just feel, you know, I really liked that as a series opener. I just thought it was a really interesting idea and a really interesting format to go with. As well as sort of having, you know, impact on the rest of the series and stuff. You know, that was kind of where we first realised that we were actually going to get continuity in this series. You know, I really liked seeing Marinette struggle with her, the plots of seeing Marinette struggle with her hero life versus her civilian life, and how that affected her mental state as well as her school and her friendships with her friends and things. You know, I just thought it was a really interesting kind of plot to really kind of weave through not just the first sort of 3-4 episodes, but through the series so far. You know, it is still something that kind of comes up from time to time. I thought it was really interesting, just an interesting and relevant plot point, because obviously, you know, that's a really interesting thing to do with a sort of, you know, oh, we have a civilian life and a hero life, let's, you know, how are they going to cope with that kind of thing. It was interesting, really interesting to see. The reveals that have happened so far, you know, I really like how those have been done and how that's progressing the plot, you know, with Alia knowing, Nina knowing some things about Alia, yada yada. I wish they did a bit more with Cat Noir. Like, I am in that camp of feeling like he's just done nothing for a good series in a bit now. They really don't seem to know what they want to do with Cat Noir. However, they seem to be building towards him not feeling like Ladybug needs him anymore, with Wishmaker and Optigami and things. All those sort of episodes seem to kind of be hinting at a sort of, you know, is Adrian starting to feel a bit kind of left out sort of thing. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do with that plot point. And some of my favourite episodes as well, Crocodile and Mega Leech, I think have done really, really good stuff with the heroes that they introduce with Polymouse and Purple Tigress. I think in the past, a lot of the sort of new hero episodes feel like the episode was built just to introduce them, as opposed to them feeling like they fit naturally into helping out with the story. Like, you know, you look at them and you go, I can't see any other situation where that power would be useful in a fight against a supervillain, whereas especially with things like Mega Leech and Crocodile, you feel like they were just, you know, yes, the episode was written to introduce them, but you do feel like their powers could be used in other scenarios and stuff, and I really liked the way they did those episodes. As well as the sort of plot points in those episodes, but I'll circle back to that. I just feel that, you know, it just worked really well, not just as an introducing a new hero, but also just within the continuity of the show and just as a sort of like underlying themes and things. Which brings us to Wishmaker. Now, Wishmaker is easily, I think, my favourite episode of Miraculous to date. Yeah, first of all, the plot, because it fits the repetitive episodic format that I have mentioned throughout this entire video. You know, there's a thing, you know, Marin and Adrian have got their sort of careers fair and they don't know what to do with their lives. And then you see the villain who gets akumatized, and then they have to transform into Cat Noir and Ladybug, they have to fight the villain, they bring in Viperion for a bit, and then they defeat the villain, and then they go back and they've sort of resolved their problems they were having at the beginning of the episode. Very run-of-the-mill Miraculous. But what I love about Wishmaker is that it has an underlying theme and an underlying message that is woven throughout the story in Marinette and Adrian as civilians, in Ladybug and Cat Noir as superheroes, and in the akumatized villain as well. You know, the whole story is about, you know, careers and futures, and especially for like teens and younger kids and things, not knowing what you want to do with your life is a huge sort of like stress that a lot of people feel, and I think this episode was just a really interesting way to almost address that. And I really wish that the show had sort of gone into each episode with a, what message can we have for kids here, what sort of thing can we put our characters through to show other kids how to really deal with these sort of issues. You know, it really would have benefited from wanting to do that, and I think it works so well here. You know, you see Marinette, who is almost overwhelmed by all the different choices, versus Adrian, who has got no idea what he wants to do with his life. And honestly, because Marinette and Adrian are supposed to be, you know, both the two protagonists of the show, even though, you know, it's been increasingly more of a focus on Marinette and Adrian really gets left behind. I am in that camp that thinks he doesn't get enough screen time, but we'll get back to that. But I think having the dual protagonist thing really works here because they're like almost two sides of the same coin of like, you know, not knowing what you want to do with your life, but you've got Marinette who has too many options versus Adrian who feels like he has no options, which I thought was just an interesting thing to explore with both our main characters without it feeling like, you know, if they'd done Adrian feeling overwhelmed as well by too many choices, it would have just felt like repeating the same plot point, but actually showing that, you know, some people feel like they have too many options and some people know exactly what they want to do and some people have just got absolutely no clue whatsoever. I just thought that was a really interesting thing to build into the theme of this episode. So you have that happening with their civilian selves, and then you also have the akumatized villain, who is a character we've seen come around every now and again up until this point, one of the news presenters, he does like present shows and stuff, but then also seeing, you know, an adult figure who perhaps went into the wrong thing in life or didn't make the right decision sort of thing and still regrets kind of what he does. You know, it's almost like I don't even know how to describe it. It's just such a interesting way to look at careers and jobs, especially with that pressure put on you as young kids and the decisions that you need to make as a younger kid that then lead to being how you can be as an adult. You know, the adult character Alec feels that he's wasted his life having, you know, listened too much to what people made fun of him for when he was younger sort of thing, and you know, how he sort of ended up down this career path because he was bullied sort of stuff. Just interesting depth and nuance to the themes of an episode to show different people and their different like career paths and how they've ended up where they are, and just a way to examine, you know, that stress and that fear of not knowing what you want to do with your life that is very relevant very relevant for teenagers and kids watching. And as well, just the continuity that this episode has with other episodes. You know, in Truth and then also in Crocodile, you see sort of the development of Marinette and Luca's relationship post-breakup. You know, and that's still kind of felt at the beginning of this episode. There's still that awkwardness even though they resolve things in Crocodile, but you know, they're sort of getting back to, you know, being friends again. You know, just small little details like that are like, yes, we acknowledge what's happened in previous episodes without it being too impactful on this episode. You could still watch this episode without having seen those episodes, but you know, it still addresses the continuity, which is just like, you know, and it's just done really, really well. As annoying as I find Marinette's behaviour around Adrian, you know, I feel like this far into the show she should really be more comfortable around him as a friend sort of thing. I did think I find it really funny in this episode, the way she sort of like panics when she thinks he's nearby kind of things. You know, it was sort of like better paced and better sort of like done in this episode. And as I said, the akumatization was really good. A lot of times the akumatization is just so like random, like, you know, you'll have just a random person gets akumatized and it's completely unrelated to what's happening to Marinette and Adrian in their civilian lives and stuff, whereas like this was like fully tied into it with it being all about careers and jobs and childhood dreams and stuff. And you know, the adult character who gets akumatized, you know, it's just really relevant to what we've been seeing so far in the episode. It doesn't come out of left field. It is already developed as you're watching everything else go on. So I thought that was just really, really well done. And I thought Viperion was well utilised in this episode. You know, he's got his sort of 5-minute second chance power. He can go back in time to 5 minutes ago, but you know, that sort of thing. And yeah, because as I said, I usually feel like a lot of the, even in the previous Viperion episodes, where he's been like, especially the one where he got introduced, you almost feel like that akumatized villain was almost, their power was created solely for them to have an excuse to use this particular power for this superhero. Whereas like, I felt like it was just well utilised in this episode sort of thing. Like, you know, if they get hit by this Wishmaker guy, their identities will be revealed. They're going to need a chance to go back and stop that from happening sort of thing. It just, I don't know, I just feel like he was well utilised this episode and it didn't feel as shoehorned in as, say, Pagella was in that episode. I really felt like, you know, I can't like see any other time where her power would be useful apart from in that very specific scenario. So yeah, I thought Viperion was really well used. Especially since he's like a familiar character, a familiar superhero. You know, we know how his power works, we know how he sort of thinks, and you know, I thought as well just sort of seeing how he sort of goes through putting together the bits of what the plan is after Ladybug uses her lucky charm kind of thing. You know, it just works all really well together. And him finding out the identities of Ladybug and Cat Noir, again, just adds to the development of the show, to the plot, to his development, the development of his relationship with Marinette and friendship with her, as well as his friendship with Adrian. Now that he knows the secret but has to keep it even from them. You know, it just adds more weight to the story and just moves things forward even ever so slightly. Because it was because of her identity of Ladybug that Marinette broke up with Luca in the first place. Whereas now he understands why that had to happen kind of thing. You know, it just adds that little extra detail to the story. I mean, now there are several people that know identities. You know, Carapace and Rena Rouge know each other's identities. Rena Rouge knows Ladybug's identity and vice versa. But this is now also the first time somebody knows who Cat Noir is, which is going to be really interesting to see going forward. And yeah, again, interesting to see Adrian muse about Ladybug not needing him anymore. I thought that was quite skipped over, but like they seem to be building towards. There've been a few moments where Adrian feels like overshadowed by other heroes, or like Ladybug doesn't need him anymore. I'm really curious to see if they're going to do something with that. I really hope they do. Just as long as not like a repeat of Chat Blanc, because I don't really like that episode. And I really like the way they defeated the villain. You know, I think in the recent sort of series, the way that they use their powers to defeat the villains and stuff has just been a little bit more clever and a little bit more fun to watch than just a sort of random thing. You know, I quite liked how it was done in this episode by almost using Wishmaker's power against him by getting that guy who wants to be a dino huggy sort of thing. You know, you can tell this is for kids with what the plot is. But yeah, I just thought that was really, really interestingly done, and yeah, just more interesting than some other some other of Ladybug's plans have been in the past. I really appreciate how they also have recently only been showing like one transformation per episode, because obviously, you know, we've got these sort of full 30-second long transformation sequences for each superhero, and obviously if you've got like 3 or 4 people transforming per episode, that's like 2 minutes of your screen time gone. So like I like that actually only Viperion had his full transformation and we just saw, you know, Ladybug and Cat Noir, they just transformed behind a closed door sort of thing. We just saw the light. Because we're familiar with their transformations, we don't need to see them all the time. I like that they did that, even though I hate Luca's transformation into Viperion, like, I just don't like that. This episode had no business being as fucking funny as it did. Just the pause when Principal Damocles goes to like change into his little costume was fucking hilarious. The Crocojagged as well, just like who can't swim and then is like sunbathing and having a sort of existential conversations with his son, so funny. The banana man whose dream was to be a cucumber was just in Cat Noir just like deadpan as it rolls behind him. Fucking hilarious, like comedic timing in this was just brilliant. Speaking of like Crocojagged and Jagged Stone and stuff, you know, just like little moments like that as well that just nod to the continuity of other episodes. Like, you know, we find out this series that he is Luca and Julica's dad. We've sort of seen his relationship with Luca kind of progress over a few episodes. So just like little 1 or 2 second moments that just nod towards that as well, I've just really appreciated seeing. So yeah, I just like that they're acknowledging continuity, even though, you know, you can, as I said, you can still watch this episode without having watched all those other episodes and understand what's going on, but they're still acknowledging the continuity of things that have happened previously. And like that's kind of why I say that this is like one of the best episodes, was because they really just found their stride with how to have a contained story as well as then have it exist within the wider plot and the wider development of all these characters. And I feel the pacing of the episode overall was just done very well, with the sort of civilian stuff versus the superhero stuff, with the quick post-action scene that we have as well, and the implications for that has for going forward. I just think it was just such a well-paced episode, action-wise, plot-wise, character-wise, as well as I said, acknowledging the continuity of things that have happened up until this point. And even had some sort of smaller like themes and moments about, you know, technology versus the real thing, with that whole thing about, you know, having a real life stringed instrument versus an app on your phone, just like little things like that. Or, you know, with Andre and how he was in a sort of dead end office job and then decided to sort of follow his passion. It's kind of like, it's just nuances like that in these smaller moments that just sort of really build into the rest of the episode and just like the rest of the world, as well as just providing all the social commentary on just general things, which I think for shows aimed at kids and teens, it's something that perhaps should be done a little bit more. Just, yeah, because it should. You know, even on touching on consent a little bit at one point with you know, Ladybug pointing out that, yeah, technically this guy's making people happy with their childhood dreams, but he's doing it without their consent, and that's important. You know, just little things like that that just build into it being a really good episode for kids to be watching. Miraculous Ladybug could have been a well-paced kids show that helps them understand how to deal with negative emotions in our world, because I think that's one thing that I think the show really should have done, is really leaned heavily into the akumatizations and how these people end up as supervillains. You know, because they have these like negative emotions like being upset or angry or frustrated, and I really feel like they sort of missed a trick with wanting to perhaps show healthy coping mechanisms for that, because you could almost have it as a sort of, you know, the akumatized villain is someone who takes this out on other people versus some people who can maybe understand that they are not ruled by these emotions, but it's still okay to feel them from time to time. You know, they sort of touch on that almost ever so slightly in Master Fu's episode 6, I think it's called Monster Fu or Furious Fu, where Suhan, the new sort of guardian guy that kind of turns up, about to get akumatized, you see him say, you know, my anger is mine, but I am not my anger. You know, just, they really could just touch on things like that a lot more than they do in an episode that is, in a show that is so, you know, a huge part of it is emotions and how that makes people feel. And like, as I said, it's a show for kids and teens who, you know, notoriously are very much ruled by emotions and things. You know, scientifically, teenagers especially are in that mindset where their emotions do dominate a lot of the things that they do. And they can't rationalise things perhaps as well as adults do. Like, it is a whole scientific thing that one of my teachers was telling me about years ago. You know, that's like the difference between, you know, being immature and mature is kind of the way your brain has developed past your emotions and able to sort of understand and sort through them all better than like kids and things who will just like, you know, be completely dictated by them. It could be a show that like teaches kids and teenagers how to deal with that and how to express themselves without hurting anybody and things, you know, but it doesn't, and I just feel like I completely missed a trick because that would just be such an interesting thing to do with the show. You know, they could have used the dual protagonist format to its advantage, like I mentioned earlier, with almost having Adrian and Marinette provide either mirrors or, you know, two people on similar paths that perhaps go in different directions. They really could just have used their dual protagonist format to their advantage, but I don't think they really do, since they insist on focusing on Marinette as opposed to developing them equally. And you even use the love square as a way to sort of like, you know, explain to kids how to deal with like feelings like that and things without, again, hurting anybody, making things difficult, you know. Just, it just could be a really, really good sort of almost subtly educational show for kids to watch. But it's insistent on not having continuity and the it's just for kids thing, I think, really just sort of let it down, where they just didn't really lean into the themes and stuff that they really could have. And I'm honestly like, I really wish we could have been able to see the original idea that the guy had for the comic that he had that was aimed at kids, at teenagers, and was a bit more darker. I would have been really interested to see what that would have been about, because I think them being pushed into having it for younger kids kind of just maybe took away a lot of the sort of creative ideas they perhaps had going into the show initially. You know, they really could have lent into Adrian as a character who's isolated and lonely and has a really strict parents. They really could have like lent into that storyline and how that, and examine how that affects kids and stuff who have such extremely strict parents, and how it maybe affects their social skills and stuff, and what other kids as their friends can maybe do to try and help them from their perspective, you know. Things they did with Marinette struggling with her civilian and superhero lives was really, really interesting, because obviously so many teenagers feel overwhelmed by the different things they have to juggle with, whether that be homework, spending time with friends, extracurricular, what their parents expect of them. Some kids do actually have to start having jobs when they're 16, you know, and must feel overwhelmed with trying to balance everything. I think that they really could have examine that point from the lens of people who feel overwhelmed by so many things in their lives. But again, because of their sort of insistence of it's just for kids and we don't want plot lines to go on for too long, it got wrapped up quite quickly with not as much nuance and depth as perhaps it could have had. And it could have just been a really, really good coming of age story, but it kind of isn't, because they insist on not really developing things across a period of time. They want things to be slightly more ambiguous and things, which is totally fine. Like, in no way am I saying they're wrong for not doing any of these things. I think there's so many people out there who do say shit like that. Like, there's a plethora of, oh, I can write this show better than the actual creators. Like, no, you fucking can't. You don't have deadlines, other people to work with, executives, etc., telling you what they want from this show, you know. So fuck off. But yeah, but like episodes like Wishmaker almost make me really like almost upset, because we could have had something like that if they'd perhaps been given more time and a bit more direction really to have something like this that's like, you know, an episode within continuity and stuff, and a coming of age story with depth and nuance and stuff that's still accessible for younger audiences. And I think having the underlying message of like futures and careers and stuff really helped just bring everything in this episode together. I mean, it's somewhat similar in like Mega Lead, which was a previous episode, having its underlying message of, you know, how corporations will dress up their environmentally friendly things to appear that way, and then but when you actually look into it, it's actually doing more harm to the environment than good and stuff. You know, that was a really interesting message to like explore and show through the akumatized villain and through all our characters, as well, you know, I quite like that they also put in that, you know, the two characters that have been protesting about it, Milan and Ivan, had been trying to get others involved, but they hadn't really bothered until it got really, really bad. You know, they kept on being like, oh, well, why didn't you tell us about this? And they were like, we did, you ignored us. Which really is just a bit of commentary on how so many people with climate protests and stuff, you know, don't listen to what's being said to them until it's too late kind of thing, and don't actually take on board and go, oh, I would have protested if I'd known it was happening. And it's like, well, you did know it was happening, you just chose to ignore it. So yeah, I think I've rambled on far too long. Wishmaker really is just an episode that proves what we really could have had if they'd been given like more time and things to really sort through what they wanted this show to be. And I like that they have finally found their stride in series 4, and hopefully for series 5, 6 and 7 we'll see more of this. You know, we've had really, really good development of the characters, their relationships with other people, the plot's moving forward quite well. We're heading towards something interesting, and I'm very, very excited to see what the finale of this series will be. You know, the way Ladybug's been dealing with villains and stuff has been more fun. I feel like she and Cat Noir have had a really interesting dynamic this series, and I'm just really excited to see where this goes. It's not perfect, it's definitely one of the best seasons so far. You know, like I said, they've really found their stride with balancing their repetitive episodic format with plot and continuity and development. But yeah, so thank you very much for watching. I know this is, like I said, it's probably quite a long video as well, because I've had to do a few versions of this, and it's not what I normally do, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're a Miraculous Ladybug fan like me, do you want to see me do more Ladybug content? Do you want me to do more cartoon content? Definitely let me know down in the comments, because it is something that I am interested in doing. You know, with Miraculous Ladybug, you know, it's one I actually have quite a lot of opinions about. You know, do you want to see perhaps more in-depth reviews of different seasons? I had an idea of like rewatching the show and like recording myself watching it, and then I'll like talk through perhaps some the plot things that happen, the character things that happen as they happen, as well as then just pointing out some like fun animations decisions as a way to almost practice myself, because even though I'm not a professional, I only know very little about it, almost as a way to kind of practice looking for all these different decisions that they've made on a technical level to try and understand them from my point of view. If you want to see something like that, definitely let me know. Or maybe, like I said, maybe just do season reviews or something like that. Definitely let me know what you want to see if you do want to see me do some more Miraculous Ladybug stuff. I had an idea of like, you know, because obviously with a lot of the videos, like I said, there was a lot of videos where people were like, oh, I can write this better than the show. And whilst I think that attitude was wrong, I did enjoy the videos themselves as almost like fan fiction type things, just to see what other ideas people have. I did almost sort of like have an idea of doing that myself, but almost as a video fan fiction kind of idea, because I have got ideas of how I would jiggle the show around if like from an almost like imaginary reboot sort of point of view, in the same way that, you know, She-Ra was a reboot of the original She-Ra sort of thing. You know, if you want me to like do videos where I just like talk through what I would have done with that, because I can't write for shit, let me know. And as I said, I didn't really want to contribute to the I can do this better videos, because like that's not the attitude I have for it at all. I think the show is fantastic and it's done a very, very good job so far, and people are unnecessarily harsh on it. Thoughts? Let me know. But anyway, have you seen Miraculous Ladybug? Let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. What do you think of the new series, and what did you think of Wishmaker? Am I wrong for saying it's the best episode of Miraculous? What do you think the best episode of Miraculous is? Definitely let me know down in the comments. If you liked this slightly more different video, definitely leave a like, and if you want to see more videos that I do, definitely feel free to subscribe. I post 2 times a week on Tuesdays and Fridays. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.